This is not an invitation to become harsh. It is a warning about what happens when you remain agreeable for too long. If you are liked by everyone, something else is quietly missing. Your words land softly. Your boundaries are tested casually. Your presence is welcomed, but rarely deferred to. And over time, you begin to notice a pattern that no amount of goodwill seems to correct. People enjoy you, but they do not hesitate around you. They feel comfortable crossing lines. They feel safe ignoring weight. Most men are taught to pursue likability as if it were social armor. Be easy to work with. Be understanding. Be accommodating. Keep the peace. These traits are praised early and punished later. Because likability is a fragile thread. It holds only as long as you keep pulling it gently. The moment tension appears, it snaps. Respect does not behave this way. Respect is heavier. It does not require constant maintenance. It does not depend on approval. It survives disagreement. And it often emerges only after something uncomfortable has been introduced into the system. This video is not about becoming cruel in the emotional sense. It is about understanding why firmness feels cruel to those who benefited from your softness. Why withdrawing approval feels like hostility to those who depended on it. And why the transition from being liked to being respected almost always feels like loss before it feels like structure. Most men avoid this transition because they mistake discomfort for danger. They believe that if people are displeased, something has gone wrong. This belief keeps them trapped in roles that feel safe but lead nowhere. Roles where they are included but not consulted, heard but not heeded. There is a reason certain men are rarely challenged, even when they are quiet. A reason others are interrupted, negotiated with, or ignored despite being polite and articulate. The difference is not confidence. It is not intelligence. It is not charisma. It is the presence of hard edges. Hard edges are not aggression. They are limits that do not bend under social pressure. They are standards that do not apologize. They are decisions that do not seek permission. And when these edges are absent, the world leans in. When they are present, the world steps back. Most people cannot handle this way of being because it removes reassurance. It disrupts emotional comfort. It forces others to relate to you without the guarantee of approval. And when approval is removed, behavior changes. If you are always liked, you are always safe to approach casually. Safe to push. Safe to negotiate. Safe to test. This safety feels friendly, but it erodes authority over time. People do not protect what they can easily access. They do not respect what bends immediately. This is the paradox most men never resolve. The traits that make you pleasant often make you powerless. And the traits that make you respected often feel uncomfortable to express at first. Not because they are wrong, but because they violate a conditioning built on harmony rather than structure. The rule we are exploring is often described as brutal because it requires you to disappoint people without explaining yourself. To say no without cushioning it. To let tension exist without rushing to dissolve it. To allow others to sit with uncertainty rather than rescuing them from it. This feels wrong to men who have learned to regulate the emotional climate of every room they enter. Men who smooth interactions instinctively. Who preempt conflict. Who trade firmness for approval without noticing they are doing it. But there is a cost to this trade. The cost is that others do not experience you as solid. They experience you as responsive. And responsiveness, while useful, is not commanding. It does not slow people down. It does not make them measure their words. It does not create pause. Respect creates pause. This is why strategic firmness is often misinterpreted as cruelty. It withholds emotional rewards. It does not rush to reassure. It does not soften truth to preserve comfort. And to those who relied on your likability, this feels like a sudden withdrawal of warmth. They will say you changed. They will say you became distant. They will say you became difficult. What they mean is that you stopped making it easy for them. This is the threshold. On one side is the fragile thread of being liked. It requires constant care, constant adjustment, constant emotional labor. On the other side is the iron chain of respect. It is heavier, quieter, less flexible, and once established, it does not need to be defended. If this resonates, it is likely because you have already felt the imbalance. Moments where you were agreeable and overlooked, helpful and disregarded, included and bypassed. These moments are not accidents. They are feedback. This video is not about becoming hostile. It is about becoming immovable. About understanding why certain men are taken seriously without raising their voice. Why others must constantly explain themselves to be heard. And why respect often arrives only after likability has been sacrificed. If this makes you uneasy, that is the point. Because the men who never feel this tension never leave the safe zone of approval. And the safe zone is crowded. If this resonates, understand this clearly. You were never meant to be universally liked. You were meant to be taken seriously. The problem with being liked is not that it feels good. The problem is what it trains people to expect from you. When you consistently seek harmony, others unconsciously learn that you will prioritize emotional comfort over structural truth. They learn that pressure works on you, that disappointment influences you, that silence from them creates anxiety in you. And once these patterns are learned, they are used without malice, almost automatically. This is how power erodes quietly. People do not wake up deciding to disrespect you. They simply notice what you tolerate. They notice what you explain. They notice how quickly you soften your words when tension appears. Over time, your flexibility becomes predictable. And predictability is leverage. Likability operates on exchange. You give emotional ease, others give approval. But approval is unstable currency. It fluctuates with mood, context, and self-interest. The moment your decision threatens someone's comfort, approval is withdrawn. And if approval is what you rely on, you are forced to negotiate your position. This is why the man who explains himself constantly is already compromised. Explanation is often framed as clarity, but socially it functions as submission when it is unrequested. It signals that you feel accountable for how others feel about your choices. It places your internal authority outside of yourself. Respect does not work this way. Respect is built when your decisions remain intact even when they are disliked. When your boundaries do not dissolve under emotional pressure. When disagreement does not trigger justification. The absence of explanation creates a vacuum, and vacuums are uncomfortable. People instinctively fill them with assumptions. Often, those assumptions elevate your position rather than diminish it. This is why silence is misread as strength. Not because silence is magical, but because it denies others access to your internal process. When people cannot see your gears turning, they stop trying to manipulate them. Likability, on the other hand, invites inspection. It reassures others that your reactions are available, that your emotions are accessible, that your decisions are negotiable. This accessibility feels warm, but it dissolves gravity. Think carefully about who gets interrupted in conversations and who does not. Who is challenged casually and who is approached carefully. Who is asked to justify their stance and who is assumed to have reasons. These dynamics are not random. They are responses to perceived firmness. Men who are overly liked often over-communicate. They preempt objections. They clarify tone. They soften statements. They signal approachability at every turn. This creates a paradox where their presence is welcome, but not weighted. They are included socially, but excluded strategically. The iron chain of respect forms differently. It forms when people experience friction and discover that it does not move you. When they test limits and find them intact. When they attempt to renegotiate boundaries and receive calm refusal instead of emotional negotiation. This does not require hostility. In fact, overt aggression often weakens respect because it reveals insecurity. The most unsettling firmness is quiet. It does not explain itself. It does not seek validation. It does not escalate to be felt. It simply remains. Most men struggle here because they equate kindness with softness. They believe firmness requires anger, volume, or dominance. It does not. Firmness is simply coherence between your words, your decisions, and your tolerance. When those three align, people adapt. What feels cruel to others is often just the absence of emotional cushioning. When you stop cushioning disappointment, people feel exposed. When you stop smoothing friction, people feel resistance. When you stop overgiving, people feel loss. They interpret this as you becoming harsher. In reality, you have become clearer. This clarity forces a reordering. Some people step back. Some become irritated. Some attempt to provoke explanations. These reactions are diagnostic. They reveal who was benefiting from your lack of structure. Respect does not come from being liked less. It comes from being moved less. From not shifting your position to preserve emotional harmony. From allowing others to manage their reactions without managing them for them. This is why the transition feels dangerous. You are removing a familiar tool. You are letting silence replace reassurance. You are letting firmness replace flexibility. And in the early stages, this feels like social risk. But what replaces it is stability. When people know where you stand and that you will remain there, behavior changes. Negotiations shorten. Conversations sharpen. Interactions slow down. You are no longer processed casually. Likability invites comfort. Respect creates contour. And contour is what gives presence shape. The reason most men never make the transition from being liked to being respected is not ignorance. It is cost. Respect demands losses up front. It demands that you survive moments of misunderstanding without rushing to correct them. It demands that you tolerate being seen as colder than you are. It demands that you let certain relationships weaken rather than contort yourself to preserve them. This is where imitation fails. Weak men hear the idea of stop being liked and turn it into performance. They become sharp-tongued, abrasive, performatively indifferent. They mistake cruelty for firmness and arrogance for gravity. This backfires immediately because it reveals hunger. A man trying to force respect exposes how much he needs it. True respect emerges when you are willing to lose approval without replacing it with theatrics. The internal shift is subtle, but brutal. You stop monitoring reactions. You stop adjusting tone to manage comfort. You stop offering emotional discounts to keep others close. This creates silence after statements, gaps in conversation, micro-tensions that used to be smoothed over. These gaps are where respect forms. When you speak and do not rescue others from their discomfort, they are forced to process you differently. They slow down. They become careful. They begin to assume you have reasons, even if you do not provide them. This is psychologically destabilizing for people who are used to access. Some will test you. They will push boundaries harder, not because they dislike you, but because they are recalibrating. They want to see if the firmness is real or temporary. This phase is uncomfortable because it feels like conflict without noise. The mistake most men make here is retreat. They interpret resistance as failure and revert to old habits. They explain, they soften, they apologize for firmness. And the moment they do, the entire structure collapses. Respect only stabilizes when resistance is met with consistency. This is why the shift feels isolating. The social environment reorganizes. People who benefited from your flexibility fade. People who value structure remain. Interactions become fewer but denser. Conversations become shorter but heavier. You are no longer the emotional support beam of the room. You are a fixed point. This is not comfortable for everyone around you, and it is not always comfortable for you. Being liked provides constant feedback. Respect provides none. You do not get reassurance. You do not get praise. You get altered behavior. People show up differently. They choose words more carefully. They respect time more precisely. They do not test as casually. They do not lean as freely. This is how you know the shift is real. The internal danger is loneliness masquerading as clarity. Without discipline, a man can mistake emotional withdrawal for strength. He can confuse detachment with depth. This is why respect must be paired with internal stability. If you do not know who you are, firmness becomes rigidity. Silence becomes emptiness. But when internal structure exists, the external effect is unmistakable. You stop being managed by others' moods. You stop being pulled into explanations you never owed. You stop being the emotional negotiator in every interaction. This frees attention. It frees time. It frees energy. People begin to meet you where you stand instead of where they want you to bend. This is the real payment. Not popularity, not warmth, but coherence. A man who is coherent does not need to be liked. His presence carries weight because it is predictable in principle, not in reaction. Others adapt because adaptation is easier than resistance. This is why respect lasts longer than approval. Approval expires the moment comfort ends. Respect persists through disagreement. And once this shift completes, there is no returning without consequence. At the end of this transition, one truth becomes unavoidable. Respect cannot be requested, negotiated, or performed into existence. It is a structural response to consistency under pressure. The men who fail here are not the cruel ones. They are the strategic ones who try to shortcut the process. They attempt to act respected without accepting the losses that respect demands. They withhold warmth as a tactic. They deploy silence as punishment. They manufacture distance to provoke reaction. This always reveals intent. The moment your behavior is designed to be interpreted, it loses gravity. People sense manipulation, even if they cannot articulate it. And manipulation invites resistance. The iron chain of respect forms only when your decisions are made without the audience in mind. When you are willing to be misread without correcting the record. When your boundaries exist for function, not optics. This is the brutal rule most men resist. If you still need to be understood, you are not ready to be respected. Respect emerges when you remove yourself from the emotional economy. When you stop trading reassurance for harmony. When you allow silence to stand without explanation. This does not make you distant. It makes you sovereign. There is a difference. Distance is avoidance. Sovereignty is containment. One leaks insecurity. The other signals internal order. Men who embody respect do not posture. They do not harden their voice. They do not advertise firmness. Their behavior is plain. Their refusals are simple. Their commitments are exact. They do not overcommit and then resent others for it. They say less and mean all of it. This is why respect feels heavier than fear and quieter than dominance. People around you begin to adjust their expectations. They stop assuming access. They stop presuming availability. They stop testing casually. You become someone who must be approached deliberately. This is not because you are threatening, but because you are no longer flexible for convenience. The final consequence is irreversible. Once people recalibrate to your firmness, returning to likability does not restore warmth. It only creates confusion. The structure collapses if you attempt to oscillate. Respect requires consistency over time, not intensity in moments. This is why most men hover in the middle. Half liked, half respected, fully exhausted. To cross fully into respect is to accept that some people will never forgive you for changing the terms. They will call you colder, harder, less fun. What they mean is that you stopped subsidizing their comfort. That is not cruelty. That is adulthood. The danger is not becoming unlikable. The danger is becoming hollow. If firmness is not anchored to values, it turns brittle. If silence is not anchored to clarity, it turns empty. Respect without substance decays into intimidation. But when substance exists, respect becomes stabilizing rather than oppressive. You stop managing perceptions. You stop rehearsing explanations. You stop negotiating your own limits. You stand where you stand, and others orient themselves accordingly. This is Machiavelli's brutal rule beneath the surface. Power does not announce itself, and respect does not seek witnesses. It settles, and once it does not need reinforcement. The iron chain does not tighten through force. It holds because it was forged without performance. That is the trade, and few are willing to make it.